Happy Friday, friends. Hope everybody's had a tremendous week. I want to welcome you to the You Are Worthy Network. And I want to personally thank each one of you. You guys are tremendously encouraging and supporting. And I'm amazed at how God is just growing this group and appreciate all the feedback and all the thoughts, suggestions, encouragement. It truly is a community of folks that are just trying to do their best to encourage one another and to remind each other that you are worthy of love, respect, and success. And I am super grateful for each one of you. I'm super excited today to bring you our guest, and I'm going to, you know me, I'm going to read a little bit about her and her bio. um, I've gotten to know Susie. Susie and I were introduced a couple of weeks ago, and we spent some time on an introductory Zoom, and just a lot of things aligned. I think her warmth and authenticity and her wisdom are going to come blaring, and I mean that in the most complimentary way. It's really going to resonate with you today. So, again, thank you for being here, and we're going to jump right in. Susie Schaefer is a licensed clinical therapist, life strategist, consultant, and speaker with over 2 decades of experience in psychology, leadership development, and human behavior. She is the founder of the Suzi Method, a transformational framework that helps individuals and organizations build resilience, emotional intelligence, and sustainable confidence. Her consulting work equips leaders, executives, and teams with evidence based strategies to manage stress, improve communication, and cultivate a culture of empowerment and high performance. Known for her bold, no nonsense approach balanced with deep compassion, Susie brings clarity to complex challenges, helping organizations strengthen their people while driving meaningful results. Through her signature programs, including the Comeback Code, the Divorce Code, and the Worthy Collective, Susie blends psychology, neuroscience, and practical tools to help women break free from unhealthy patterns, silence self-doubt, and rise into lives of purpose, resilience, and clarity. Susie equips women to stop chasing external validation, set unshakable standards, and build lasting confidence from the inside out. Her work has become a movement, whether she's advising leaders, consulting with organizations, or working with individuals. Her mission is clear: to help people rise into their fullest potential with strength, clarity, and confidence. Wow, I've got so many questions, but Susie, welcome to the You Are Worthy
Thank
Network.
you. Thank you so much. It's a lot.
Oh, but it's good.
It is
It's
so
so
good.
good to have you here. I'm excited to introduce you to the network. And Susie, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what part of the country are you in? What do you like to do for fun? Tell us about you.
Yeah. Okay. Currently I'm in North Dakota, so you might hear a little bit. I get told I live in Idaho. I've lived there for the last 4 years, and when I'm there, I get told I have an accent, and I didn't know that until I moved out of North Dakota. But I'm visiting family, so I'm a little out of my kilter right now, out of my office and space. But I'm so glad to be here. My family lives in North Dakota. I have 7 siblings and my parents, and all of them live here except me. But two
Wow.
of my grown children moved to Idaho, and my oldest daughter took my 4 grandbabies with. And so I had to follow, and it was great timing. I have 3 adult kids. I'm a gam, they call me Gammy, of 6. I have 6 grandbabies. I was a young grandma, and so at that time I was like, I'm not a grandma. So very embedded in my family life. I have been in the social work profession for 30 years, and specifically in the clinical, licensed clinical work for about 21 years now. And so I've done everything from private practice to working for the government, directing the behavioral health program for the state of Idaho for a military organization, and a couple of years ago got had somebody that was in my life that came back around 10 years later, and she's like, I know your work, the world needs you bigger. We need your voice. We need your work bigger than just kind of the one-on-one. We still want you to stay in your framework of mental health and therapy and helping people, but how can we expand that? And so I got into the kind of doing the coaching, the speaking, the training, getting certified in that so that I have the ability to not stay so structured under a license and have the ability to really expand nationally and internationally. And so that has been my work, my passion. I love working with all people. My passion, because of my own personal experience and what I went through in relationships, is working with women, developing the value and helping them understand the difference between like self-esteem and actual self-worth, which I know we're going to talk about, and really just understanding how the psychology behind what we do, because I think that's huge. And oftentimes we hear the problems, but we don't understand what actually happens within our brain, our chemicals, our nervous system. And so I teach like the psychology of heartbreak. And then most recently, I just decided I wanted, due to some of my own professional experiences within systems and organizations, I wanted to expand into the consulting arena and work on emotional intelligence in the workplace and how does mental health affect productivity and mindset in the workplace and burnout and compassion fatigue, especially in our area. We experience a lot of compassion fatigue and we mistake that just for burnout. So that's kind of in a nutshell. For fun, I love hanging out with the family and my friends. I love to travel. So I'm kind of in a hiatus right now, building business while I'm traveling and seeing family and friends, and love going to the mountains. We camp a lot, do the fires and sit by the water. And so that's kind of my getaway in my peace space. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it, but we could probably talk about that for weeks. So
Be something in the water because I have now talked to three people in the last 72 hours that are from North Dakota. And I don't think I knew anybody from
yeah,
North Dakota
yeah,
before this week, but
that's
it must
funny.
be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, okay. So obviously you have a lot of credentials, a lot of qualifications, you help a lot of different people. What was this what you went to school for? Is this what you always wanted to do, or did that have a journey to it, so to speak?
Yeah. So since I was a little kid, I knew I always wanted to work with children specifically. And so I had been in, after I got my bachelor in social work, I had worked in a group home and then I worked in child protection services where I did we call them assessments now, but back then investigations on child abuse and neglect. And it was such a hard, broken system to work in that, I was leaving kids in environments and homes. And when I would go interview them, and the devastation. So I had made a decision at that time that I wanted to make a greater impact one-on-one and with kids and families. So I went back to school, went to grad school, did 3 years of supervision to get my license, got licensed, and then started working in the private sector of doing mental health. So I worked primarily in the first part of my career probably for 15 years just working with children and families and trying to affect change within those systems and switching my focus to what we used to look at. And I know some of the systems have changed since I've been in child protection, but really it was what is kind of going in and finding everything that's wrong, and rather than focusing to a strength-based approach. And like even in some of the roughest families, there's strengths in there, and to work on those strengths and help parents and kids kind of meld and kids individually. Like sometimes it was, listen, you come from a rough environment, but how are we going to build your skills so that you can survive the environment and then switch generational patterns. So that's kind of where my career started. And then obviously working with kids, you're working with adults. So I had a lot of adults that would hear about my work and then ask if they could work with me. And then I had gotten really sick in 2018. I didn't have insurance, had never been sick before. And
Mm.
so that's how I got into the military sector, where I was still doing mental health, but in the military, I did active duty Air Force and then the Guard, Army Guard, just to have more benefits and to have some stability while I was doing the private practice and whatnot. So that's kind of my career path. And then, like I said, 2 years ago, one of my very good friends had gotten a hold of me And she is in the coaching financial arena, and so got into a mastermind, and then it's just taken off since then. So yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was just a quick thought on child services.
Yeah.
Like I'm very familiar with that system, and you often hear people talk about how policemen, firefighters, teachers all deserve a bump in pay, and I totally agree, by the way.
Yes.
Um, but that's an area. Most of those child service workers, especially the case workers, you talk about overworked, underpaid,
Yes.
underappreciated. The
Hmm.
system is set up to have high turnover, lack of consistency.
Yeah.
They need more pay for sure.
Yeah, they sure do. And I think what we miss kind of as a society, and I, like you, I could get into that topic forever, but when we had some issues within the system, what was kind of tried to was a smoke screen of, oh, it's just a very stressful job. That's why there's burnout. And our I guess our opposition to that was, yes, it is a very rough system to work in, but the system is broken. It doesn't work for what it's supposed to. So yes, it's a very stressful job going in and seeing the trauma and the things that children go through and families go through. But when you have a system that's very fractured and broken and inundated, right? It's so inundated and overloaded. The ratio of like cases to a worker, in some states is astronomical. They literally are set up to fail. So if the system doesn't work, and then that creates obviously more to the burnout and, yeah, overworked and seeing very traumatic things on a daily basis, and then not having the support systems in place. So it's kind of this snowball effect.
Yeah, the last thing I'd say about that is the nature of the job and the interactions with the families, that in of itself's enough.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think it's the administrative
Yes.
overload on them, multi counties, multi driving paperwork.
Hmm.
Anyway, I
Yeah.
that's soapbox.
Yeah.
Um, so let's transition a little bit here. So what would you say is your sweet spot? Who do you really love to serve? Like you can't wait to get out of the bed and go help this type of person.
I'll tell you what, this has been one of, I think my mentor Marissa has tried to pound this into my head, because when you're in the mental health arena, it's everybody, right? And so and I still have this drive and passion that it's hard to niche it down into one population. So this has been my biggest struggle. And so but my main focus right now is women, and in their recovery stage of divorce, discard, heartbreak, but also women who feel stuck, unworthy, kind of on that hamster wheel of life. Like they feel like they're doing all the things and fulfilling all the roles and fulfilling all the expectations of everybody else, but still feel like they're kind of just not feeling a sense of deep rooted purpose, even though they're serving all these roles. And what we talk about, the worthiness, and how do you develop value in your life and feeling a sense of passion and purpose given all of the roles and outside of the roles. I teach that a lot. If you stripped all of the roles away, who are you? And
Mhm.
so many of my clients are like, I don't know. I haven't thought about that. Or I never really sat and thought about me. And so they have this emptiness, even though, and then guilt and shame that come with it, because they're like, I shouldn't. I'm this, I'm this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And so that's been my passion and focus the last couple of years. And also because of what I went through on my own. And I woke up one day and thought, how did I get here? And if I went through this, and this is what happened to me, and I'm strong and independent and a business owner and traveling the world and doing all the things, it could happen to anybody. So I started researching into how did I get into this? What is it? That's where I started getting into the psychology and the neuroscience and the evidence-based statistics and data that's out there, and started to understand, like, I didn't even know as a therapist what was going on with me and what I was missing and where I needed to grow and thrive, as a recovering people pleaser and an enabler and codependent is what I learned, and very much fit with the family that I grew up in. How do we serve everybody else, and we're over here self-sacrificing and not understanding what that looks like, right? So that's kind of in a nutshell, that's kind of where I'm at with serving women, and then and organizations too, because I think our work life affects everything we do too, because we spend half of our life in our workspace doing, right, whatever it is that we're um, whatever it is that we're doing in our career path.
Yeah, I love how personal growth seems to be a priority to you. And I won't go down this road too far, but I can tell you that uh, I have a program that helps people on many different levels. And as I have worked with a few counselors, um, when we have a breakout session and I may be teamed up with them, it's pretty amazing to me how many of them say to me, I've been doing this for 15 years, 25 years. I've never told anybody what I'm about to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you can't pour from an empty cup. We've all heard
No.
that, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be not only conscientious of our wounds, our how our history, our
Mm-hmm.
traditions, our upbringing have
Yeah.
um, created the present mindset that we have if we haven't
Mm-hmm.
been given a new one, new tools to have a new one. And I love that you're all about constantly improving through personal growth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's only going to help your clients even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that never stops, right? And I think in one of the very first steps that I teach in my Worthy Collective is self-reflection to build self-awareness. And when we stop doing that or get caught up in some of the challenges and the heaviness of life, we lose sight. And what I realized on my path is I was so busy trying to fit into somebody else's value system to make that person happy that I was betraying my own values. And I wasn't consciously aware of that, but it veered me on a path that took me very far, like out of my wheelhouse. And had I been in constant alignment with those values and aware and never compromised them and stood firm in what my values were, those decisions that I made and trying to do everything I could to serve somebody else and make somebody else happy, it wouldn't have happened. And so it's a hard thing when we talk about that self-reflection piece. It is what I call what I just worked with a client yesterday, and I said it's radical honesty. And you have to
Mhm.
be honest with yourself first, because we're so in tune to focusing on external factors, right? Like what somebody said about me, the rumor somebody spread, or how somebody treated me, or they cheated on me, or they betrayed me, that we get so caught up in the external factors that even though we go through experiences and things that necessarily aren't our fault, are we making choices personally that are contributing to allowing some of those things in our life? Now, don't get me wrong. There are tragedies and things that happen in people's lives that they don't have control over, and it's not a choice. But in a lot of our decisions, we deflect what is our role in it. And so even in my situation, I made a choice to be with somebody and stay with that person. I didn't deserve what came with that, but then I had to look deep into why did I continue to pick this type of person, because I did. And also, and then what was it in me that felt the need to stay and prove and do more and give more and be more. And it came down to the self-awareness, which I teach, and then the value, right? And that goes to your self-worth, not your confidence or your self-esteem, but your self-worth. And that never changes. Your worth is always there. It should be there. That's your value. And despite what happens to you or the choices you make, that should always be there. But we fluctuate external validation with our worthiness, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you've alluded to situations you were in, choices you made. What I try to encourage the network with all the time is that wherever they're at, and we never want to minimize what somebody's been through. We always want to
Mhm.
be compassionate.
Mhm.
Um, but I like in your bio that you're bold too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
reminds me of the quote, and it sounds harsh at first until you really digest it in its entirety. What happened to you wasn't necessarily your fault,
Right.
but the healing is still your responsibility.
Amen. Yes. Yeah.
So it does bring personal responsibility into it.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a lot of people watching, and you said this, some things, life is tough. Sometimes things
Hmm.
happen that are not our fault.
Yes.
Sometimes it's choices. Sometimes it's a combination. But I like to remind people, and this is a good place to do it, that everyone watching is worthy of
Yeah.
love, respect, and success.
Yes.
Even on your worst day emotionally, where you don't feel like any of that, and maybe if you're watching, you that's one of your days today, and I'm sorry you're having that kind of day. My encouragement to you is to hang in there. This will pass. And that's why I love Lamentations 3:22 and 23, because his mercies are new every morning.
Mm.
Sometimes
Yes.
we just need a fresh start.
Yeah.
But don't do this life alone. We weren't
Mm.
meant to do it alone. We're meant to do it in trusted community.
Mhm.
I say all of that to ask you, Susie, can you describe a specific period on your journey where you didn't embrace the fact that you are worthy of love, respect, and
Mhm.
success?
Yeah, I feel like I've always been part of my personality has always been very guilt ridden. And so my goal was always to make everybody else happy and to figure out what it is that everybody else needed without understanding. And my dad, who is an amazing human being, told me one day when I was going through all this, he said, we taught you to be a giver, but we didn't teach you to not do it at the expense of yourself. And he was self-reflecting. And I never blame my parents for that by any means, but you don't know what you don't know until you know, right? So, I mean, and so I think my defining moment was and when it was interesting when you said that you'll talk to, a circle of people and they'll be like, I've never told anybody this. And 2 years ago, I would have never spoke this publicly. Most of my family didn't even know what I was going through. And I had been, like I said, I had gone through this life that I was a teen mom. I was when I was a senior in high school, I got pregnant with my daughter. And at that time, the it was a private school, and the person of the head of that school wrote a letter about me and talked about how I would be a failure. I'd end up on welfare. I would never go to
Mm,
college, all these things. And so, I mean, that could break somebody, but because, like you said, I'm bold and I'm spicy and I'm like, oh, really? To me, it was a challenge. And
yeah.
so I wanted to give my kids, I knew that being a young mom, I was going to need to work harder to provide a life for them that they deserved and not off of just my decision. So fast forward, I had married my kids' dad at that time as a teenager, and went through this life of building business, opening private practice. We were doing family vacations, traveling. We had the house, the lake cap, all the things, that life, right? And after about 25 years of marriage, I made the decision to divorce him. And I'd only been with him since I was 15 years old. So I get out into the single dating world in my early 40s, not knowing what I was doing, thinking I knew what I was doing, and thus really bad decisions being made. I was adopted, but I knew my birth dad at that time. He had said, you're almost regressing to this 15-year-old girl who's trying to navigate through the world. So fast forward, make this decision, marry this person who I met and married him very fast, did not know him, and lost everything. I mean, I was facing 30 years
Mm,
in prison, felony charges based on false allegations, which they eventually got dropped, dismissed, all of them. However, that was 4 years. It happened during COVID. So then it slowed everything down. So for 4 years, I sat under this umbrella of that, financially ruined, spiritually, and I had gotten away from my deep rooted faith, all the things, humiliated, all the things. And so I probably a handful of people even knew what I was going through because I was so ashamed and humiliated. I was so worried about embarrassing my kids. And I mean, I was facing prison and I was like,
mm,
I could potentially have to leave my children and grandchildren. And
mm,
so I was broken, and I always say I wasn't really broken. I was bent because I always had a faith that no matter what I was going to get through it, I would find a way. But it wasn't my biggest focus is how I had let so many people down in my life because I was the strong one and I was the foundation and the fixer and the problem solver. And here I was laying on my bedroom floor one night, just curled up in a ball, saying, just thinking, like, how did did I get here? How did I So I think that was the deepest rooted point where I was like, I have failed my family, my kids, my grandkids. I may be taken away from them. And I just started praying. And it was the deepest rooted part of the shame and the guilt of and really that feeling like I had failed everybody else without recognizing I failed I should have I failed myself and who I was at my core. And I just laid it at God's feet. I said, okay, I surrender. I can't do this. And I was a control freak. I always was the problem fixer and the doer and all the things. And I just laid it at his feet and said, I'm asking for this. And I didn't ever ask to have my charges dropped. I didn't ever ask to not go to prison. I asked for strength to endure all that was to come because I'm a big purpose believer. So I told my dad, if I have to go, I'm going to get in really good shape because I use humor. And I said, and I'm going to counsel anybody that needs it. And so if that's what the plan is for my life, and when I come out, I'm going to serve whatever I learned from this experience. And so ultimately, all of my charge, everything was dismissed. I didn't plea. I didn't. Everything was done, and I started diving into my faith and putting God at the center of my life. Got out of that relationship and I still carry guilt. I'm going to tell you, and I work a lot. I think we talk about forgiveness of others so much, but we forget to talk about the forgiveness of ourselves. And oftentimes that's so much more deep rooted and harder to overcome. One of my best friends, I had a call with her last night. She's kind of going through the same I call it my dumpster fire era. That's what I call that whole era that I went through. And she's like, I'm just so mad at myself that I did this. I made these choices that resulted in these consequences. And it is one of the hardest things that I've had to work on. And I look at my kids and they're great, but they're always going to remember that time. And I had separated a lot from the family to try to shield them from kind of what was going on in my life at that time, with a lot of the abuse and things like that. And so um, I always had a sense of I wasn't a pile of crap necessarily, and I'm going to be bold about this, but but I kind of was. That's what I felt like. Even though, so it was kind of this cognitive dissonance. Like I know that I have some sort of value and I know that I brought a lot to the table, but here's the choices I made, which let so many people down. So, and that's where my journey began to shift and to change.
So I definitely want to move forward from that. I just have one question to
Yeah.
make sure I understand. So looking back at that heaviness and the real possibility of going to prison, I appreciate your perspective. You chose the sunny side of life and the
Yeah.
perspective of that. But would you say, because I just want the audience to understand, was this the consequences of your decisions, or was this the consequences of your husband's behavior, or a combination of both?
Yeah, I would say when I look at my choices, if I would have not allowed certain people into my life, into my business, the trust that I gave people that I shouldn't have, the vulnerability and kind of naivety that I had. So the decision to include people in my life that should have never been in my life in the first place,
Mhm.
um, resulted in those consequences. And because of my mental and emotional state through that relationship, I let things go that I shouldn't have. And then when I started to set boundaries, there was too much knowledge of
Mm.
my life and too much knowledge of my business that infiltrated. And then it was a it was a it was a setup. And I think that's one of the reasons that as they started investigating and um so it wasn't anything that I did necessarily that resulted in that, but it was, if that makes sense.
Yep,
So,
it
and I think
does.
that's why it got dismissed because through the investigation, they had said there's obviously there's nothing criminal, but there's negligence in just like I in how I ran my practice and who I allowed into it and who had access to some of the business runnings, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's I love the redemption aspect of it, because that's the other thing I love to remind the viewers is God's not done with your story yet.
Yes.
And this is a great time to remind them of that. He wasn't done with your story, Susie.
Mhm.
He's not done with mine. He's not done with anybody's story. As long as there's still air in our lungs and he orders the sun to rise every day,
Amen. Mhm.
which fortunately he did this morning. So I could ask you, going back to your bio for a second, I could ask you about many of these different um, programs, for lack of a better term, that you've created. Obviously, you probably know, even though we haven't talked about it at length, I'm curious about the Worthy
Mhm.
Collective. Um, I'm guessing, and I don't know this answer, I'm guessing the origin of that came from some of your own journey. Would I be correct?
Yes, 100%. Yep.
Tell us about the Worthy Collective. I'm curious.
It's one of my favorites, and it's a little bit more broad than some of my other frameworks that are more specific. So like the divorce and like comeback is from heartbreak or discard. But the Worthy Collective, what I love about it is our one of the things that I talk about all the time is we mistake like confidence for worth, which confidence will ebb and flow, right? It's more based on external validation or achievements, if you will. Whereas your self-worth is that no matter that you have this core belief and this value that no matter what happens to you, regard even of your own choices, that regardless of you are still worthy of, you are still deserving of love and affection and all of the things that come with that waver when we make poor choices or things happen in our life and that we don't feel like we're deserving. So the Worthy Collective is I do it in a master class and I also teach it in group coaching. And what it is it's the foundational beginning of how you begin to build yourself and to identify to really learn what is your self identity, what is that at your core, what do you really believe about yourself. We do get into it's not therapy, but because I'm a therapist and I have the educational background, I believe in helping people understand where those core beliefs come from. Where did you begin to think these things? How did you learn what love was? How did you learn what acceptance looked like? How did you learn to communicate? How did when you expressed feelings and were vulnerable, how was that received? And so all of that affects it doesn't just go away. And I always tell people until you face some of those things, you can't go around it or above it or under it. You have to go through it. It'll always come back, right? It always comes back, whether that's in relationships, whether that's in business, whether that's just in our own functioning. And so the Worthy Collective really starts with the very foundation of how you begin to identify some of those past core beliefs and how your values were built. When I ask people, well, tell me what your core values are. They're like, well, communication, but they don't understand and how our values change, right? Like what we value at 19 is going to be different than a lot of times what we value at, and you always have like the foundational things, but our values shift. And if we're not in alignment with those in our physical, mental, spiritual, relational, social areas of our life, I do these 8 dimensions. And so the Worthy Collective begins at foundational growth and identification of who am I outside. If I stripped all of your titles away, the mom title or the sister or the teacher or the doctor or I'm a runner or whatever that looks like, all those external things, to start to look at who am I at my core? Am I living in my purpose? What is my purpose? How do I build value and even feel worthy? So it's building how the worth of self and then identity. And then that goes into how do you set boundaries healthy? How do you communicate? How do you learn systems, right? Like who I always kind of talk about the rings around your heart and who gets your heart space and how can you love people that from a distance without allowing them in that space because they're not healthy for you. So it's this huge a collective of 12 weeks of starting from the very foundational aspects of how to begin to build that, how to and then at the end of it, the goal is that you've built that you know your worth and you claim it and you take territory over it. And on top of that, then how do you build this life that not only you desire, but you deserve and know that you're deserving of it, regardless of the dumpster fire eras that we go through?
I love. So I anticipate Even though you didn't have a ton of time to describe it, in that little time that you did so well. And the dumpster fire is a great illustration. I mean, we've all been dumpster fires, right? We're
Yes.
all a work in
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah.
Uh, so I would anticipate that just that illustration and that description you gave has only piqued the interest of many people. We're going to include your links on how to find you in the description after we get done. But tell people where they can find you to learn more.
Yeah, so my website is the suzimethod.com, and Suzi is Suzi. And on there it's got we're updating it constantly right now. And really on there it has a way to email me. Suzi at the suzimethod.com is my email. But I think you can go to that and it's probably the easiest way because there's all sorts of different links and it's learn more or contact me. I love doing I'll do like a 15 to 30 minute free consult if somebody's interested and they want to know more, also to see if they're fit, because I want to affect change. And sometimes people need to get into the deep rooted therapy realm before. And although I still work on that, I don't work when I do my Worthy Collective and work under the Suzi method. I incorporate what I know as a therapist and some of those evidence based practices, but it's not therapy. And so I love doing the free discovery call to get to know somebody and to help them figure out what they may need and then moving forward from that. So the suzimethod.com will probably get you everywhere you need to go.
SuziMethod.com.
Mhm.
Suzi, I want to encourage you that you are indeed affecting change
Thank you.
in
I
many
appreciate
lives.
that.
And thank you for sharing vulnerably your story with
Mhm.
us. What words of encouragement would you leave our viewers today?
That's a good one. I have so much. I'm a talker too, so I got into the right profession, as you can tell. um, I think my biggest words of encouragement is you are never stuck. Your mind, your thoughts, your feelings are not facts, that we get stuck in our feelings, and our feelings are not facts. They are misguiding. And when you learn to start shifting that mindset and not letting feelings override what logic should be, that there is always a way. You science shows you can change your neural pathways, but you can't do it alone. We always need connection and support, and in our darkest days we tend to isolate because of shame and guilt or overwhelm. We don't know where to go, and so reach out to somebody and get the connection. Let the vulnerability be there. That V word, I was not vulnerable. I
Yeah.
loved everybody else being vulnerable. And so just there is always a way forward, even in the most desperate times when you feel like there's not. Feeling hopeless doesn't mean that there's no hope. So
Feeling hopeless does not mean there's no hope. I love that because the hopelessness is an emotion, but the fact is there is hope. And I
yeah.
so appreciate you and your wisdom and your warmth. What I heard out of that, guys, was we have to realize that our mind is tricky
Mhm.
and we have to own our mind. And that's impossible by
Mhm.
yourself. We have
Yes.
to work on mindset
Mhm.
in community, even if that's just one other person, but don't do it alone.
Yeah.
Suzi, thank you for being here. Thank you for imparting your heart and your wisdom
Thank you.
to the network. Really, really appreciate you today.
Thank you for having me. It was so fun. We got to do it like 20 more times. I
There
loved
you
it.
go.
Thank you. Yeah.
We'll have you back sometime for sure.
Okay.
Guys, it's a great chance for me to remind you as you head into your weekend, whether you've had an incredible week, which I hope you have, or whether it's been meh, or maybe it's been really rough. You're worthy. You're
Mhm.
worthy because God said you're worthy.
Yes.
On your own, on my own, not so much.
Mhm.
But because of what Jesus did on the cross, you are worthy. And I so appreciate you. And your story is not over yet. I can't wait to hear, like Suzi's comeback story. I can't wait to hear so many of your comeback stories. Guys, stay blessed. Until next time, we'll see you soon.